All right, hi everybody. So today we have Diane Fish from King Conservation District to chat with us about value-added processing. Unfortunately, Valerie from Okanagan was unable to make it today, but I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be really great with Diane to dig into her experience. But first, just a couple of quick announcements. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, November 5th at 10 a.m., featuring Jennifer Brian Goforth of Washington State University. She's going to be talking through, they have a project called a food preservation lending library program. Essentially, it's like a community library program for like lending out equipment for value-added processing. So it's kind of half the battle to gain knowledge about how to do this kind of processing. The other half of the battle could be acquiring the tools that you need to do the work. So November's meeting will be touching on her toolkit for doing this. Next, we decided to not have a meeting in December. It's a pretty holiday heavy month, but we will be reconvening in January. We're going to be doing a really fun storytelling circle kind of event, and that'll help us kind of reflect and prepare for the year ahead, considering how to tell our funders' stories and our community stories. Next, it sounds like we're good to go for our very own conference for Gleaners in Washington State next year. I'm still submitting a date, but approximately it will be in March on a Friday in 26. It's going to be really interesting. Just a conference fully for Gleaners in Washington State next year. We've already got a few folks signed up to do sessions, and we'd love for you to be part of this community effort. I'm going to drop a sign-in sheet for proposals, which are open, and we're kind of accepting proposals until December this year. I'm dropping that into the chat now. And finally, last one, it might be canceled due to smoke, so I'm still waiting to hear back about that. But there is scheduled a apple picking event in Kashmir. About 10,000 pounds of apples we're expecting, and it will be this weekend on Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon. And if you haven't already, do feel free to sign up. It's going to be a really awesome event. You will be able to bring apples back to your own organizations, as well as I know I'm going to try to bring some apples back to you. Sorry, trying to drop in the.
That's okay. Should we go around the horn and have intros?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Diane, do you want to start off with an intro of who you are, where you're from, and the organization you're with, and then send it to somebody else?
Okie dokie. Um, excuse me, that was an unanticipated little frog there. I'm Diane Fish. I'm a resource and farm planner at Kitsap Conservation District. I'm also coordinating the farm to food pantry program there. We have a farm to freezer program and a bunch of other stuff that we do to connect farmers and food assistance programs. And as we're going around, if you as an organization are doing any sort of processing, it would be really helpful to know so that we can kind of tailor this presentation a little bit. And I will bounce it to Mariah.
Thanks, Diane. Hi everyone. I'm Mariah DeLeo with the Good Business Network of Washington. And I'm the program director for our Good Food Economy program. We do a lot in a lot of different spaces across the food system, through our online community, through our surplus and rescue marketplace, bunch of other things. I'm here specifically, we're not doing any processing, but I'm always looking for opportunities to help connect the folks that we're working with, which include both farms, seafood producers, others, even food manufacturers, with hunger relief organizations, and understanding the capacity to help with farm into processing to make that more available throughout the year through processing. And so that's what brings me here. I will pass it to Ursula.
Sorry about that. I couldn't find my mute button. Hi, everyone. I'm Ursula. I work for the Pierce County Gleaning Project. I am the scheduler and fruit tree assessor lead for the program. We have a closed loop program that are all of our apples that have like pest or disease go through to cideries and jam makers. And we also donate to schools' culinary programs as well. And I will pass it on to Grace.
Hello, I'm Grace at Fish Food Bank in Allensburg, and I've been working on kind of creating a gleaning program. So right now it looks like going to community members' backyards and picking them. And right now I don't have any like processing procedures or anything. We just pick apples and give them out.
Grace, who do you want to send it to?
Oh, I guess Olivia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Olivia. I think I know most of the folks on this call, but I am the Farm to Community Program Manager at HA and work on 3 programs, including Farm to Food Pantry, King County Farmers Share, and Growing for Good. Yeah, and I don't do value-added processing work myself, but always wanting to learn more about the work that our partners are doing. And I will pass it to Ella. Hi, everyone. My name's Ella. I'm the Farm to Community Specialist at Harvest Against Hunger. So I work on all the same programs with Olivia. And I also don't do value-added processing, but I know it's an interesting field, so I'm excited to learn more. And I'll pass it on to Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm a Vista with the Washington Gleaning Network. I'm like an engagement specialist, I think is the title. But yeah, so I don't do value-added processing, but it's always nice to learn about things that the Gleaning Network is kind of sharing. And I think that's everyone, right?
Yep, I think that's everybody.
I think so.
Right.
Except David.
Oh, it's me, David Bobanek. I'm the Executive Director here at Harvest Against Hunger. Hi, everybody. Sorry, over to you, Diane.
Okay, so are we ready to go?
I think so.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. I got a brief presentation, then we'll do some Q&A.
Great.
Can everyone see my screen? Thumbs up?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Okay, this is just a brief overview of food preservation and processing for anyone, whether you're an individual, an organization, or a farmer looking to do value added. Okay, so how do I advance? Now it's not wanting to advance. Oh, there we go. Okay. So a brief agenda here today. We're going to look at different food preservation options for like capturing the season, extending the season. We're going to talk a little bit about the regulatory framework, and then I have a list of resources. And what you see there is a picture of some soups that we processed under a resiliency grant application grant that we received a number of years ago. We did some culturally appreciated recipes. So we had beef piche, which is a Filipino recipe, and caldo de res, I think we've had. So it's a Hispanic Guatemalan. And so you can see the labels, and that's just one of the one of the freezers at one of the organizations where we partner. So we have a couple of different options for food preservation. They're shelf stable, which can include freezing as well as what we would think of as canning. But shelf stable typically means like canned foods that have long-term storage. You can dry foods or freeze dry them. A lot of folks like dried apples. They're delicious. They store really well. Kids love them. Freeze drying is a little more complicated, requires a bit more specialized equipment. But it gives you like a really, really good product. You may have had some freeze-dried products for like hiking or camping or backpacking, and it's just you can even freeze dry ice cream, though I've always kind of wondered about the rationale of that. And then freezing, so you can freeze straight across like frozen fruits as well as freezing like some sort of a processed or semi-processed food like a soup. So those are kind of the options that we're going to talk about today. So first, let's talk about shelf stable. There are two types of canning, similar process. Both involve jars and rings and lids. What determines whether or not you're able to do them with a regular water bath canner as opposed to some sort of specialized equipment like a pressure canner is the acidity of the food. So typically anything that you do with pickles, relishes, jams and jellies, they're all going to be a high acid food. And the benchmark here really is a pH of 4.6. And so salsas, anything that has some sort of acidity in it means that you're going to be able to can it in a water bath setting. And a lot of people have either done this or they have family members that have done this. This is kind of like the old school canning. The jars can be reused. It can be stored for long term. You do have some cost associated with the jars and the lids, but it's a pretty low barrier method. And I'd be kind of excited to hear about the preservation lending library, because you basically all you need is jars and lids and a product and a pot to do, that you can fill with water to do this. You don't have to use like an official water bath canner. You can use a stock pot or anything. For canning low acid foods, think green beans and corn and asparagus and potatoes. All of those require pressure canning. And that, or like if you're doing it on a large scale, the official name for the type of equipment they use is a retort. And, essentially that is something that is going to provide sufficient time and temperature to make sure that the food is safe. You can do it in jars or cans. You can reuse the jars if you're using like a standard ball or Kerr canning jar. Most commercially canned or shelf stable items, whether you're talking about any sort of item from a commercial canner, you're probably not going to reuse the jars and lids, simply because it's difficult to tell whether or not you're going to be able to achieve a seal. The one thing I would say, if you're wanting to do like canning meat or like seafood or anything like that, it does provide you with a way to capture that, especially if you don't have access to a freezer. The one thing I would say is that for the most part, where vegetables are concerned, commercially canned food is really cheap. And so if you're looking at doing some sort of shelf stable, I think, would need to focus on something like a protein that made, or you can also, if you can put beans in this category as well. A lot of people will can dry beans so that they're available to use, but it is also a low acid food. And the big concern about low acid foods is botulism. And there's a lot of folks out there on like the rebel canning lists. So they're like, yeah, we can can butter, we can can bacon. It is not a safe canning method. So just know that just because your grandma did it for a number of years and she water bathed her green beans, it probably wasn't safe. Okay, so drying and freeze drying. Drying is really low barrier and low cost. If you have clients that have access to a food, just like a regular, like American Harvest food dryer, you can dry a whole lot of different stuff. With fruits, you want to get it to the point where the food is what the term we would use is leathery. With vegetables, you want them to be dried crisp. So if you're drying something like green beans, You want it to be to the point where it snaps or it's crispy. But it's really low barrier, low cost. I mean, if you're in a warmer part of the state, I less probably than in Western Washington, but in Eastern Washington, you can do it on window screens and, just have some sort of a covering to keep flies off of it. And you can dry outside. It's really can be done with almost no equipment. It is a safe long-term food preservation method. It saves space. The difference between, a box of apples and, a couple of bags of dried apples obviously is pretty significant. And so that, drying is a very viable method to, especially where fruits are concerned. Freeze drying, more and more people are doing freeze drying. It is more expensive because you need specialized equipment. Um, it provides an excellent quality of product. If you freeze dry a strawberry, it looks exactly like the fresh strawberry and it can be reconstituted and it really is a very, very good product. It tends to preserve color a lot better than traditional drying. It people, I mean, it really is a great method, but it is more expensive. And so, in terms of like looking at making a purchase from a freeze dryer, I know Jefferson County, their food bank garden folks purchased a couple of the freeze dryers. They're about the smaller food freeze dryers are about $1,500 a piece. It's great for long-term preservation. Obviously, like any other dried product, it does save space. You can store it and seal it in Ziploc bags, or you can vacuum seal it when it's done. But the energy inputs for freeze drying, it does take a lot. It takes about the same amount of time because the product has to be frozen and then the moisture is extracted through the drying process. And so it does take almost the same length of time, maybe a little bit less than putting like apples in a standard plug-in drying dryer. But there is a much higher energy input. So if utility costs are a concern, that's something to be thinking about where freeze drying is concerned. And then there's freezing. It's a shelf-stable method of preserving food. You can do it for long-term storage. It does require a freezer. In terms of processing like soups and those kinds of things, soups and chilies and applesauce, and those are a number of the things that we've done. We're going to start doing pumpkin here for distribution to the food banks because we've got a bunch of pie pumpkins. There are fewer regulatory hurdles to freezing as opposed to shelf-stable canned items. It does require special handling. It is a time, temperature, and control for food safety item. So you're going to have a freezer. You're going to have the ability from the time that the food is processed until it is ready to be put in a freezer or ready to be packaged. You're going to have time to temperature controls for like soups. You have a certain length of time to get things cool enough so that they can be packaged, those kinds of things. But from a consumer point of view, it's very accessible. If they're going to a hunger relief organization, it's a lot of times the soups they're ready to eat. You can just pop them in a microwave. If they only have refrigeration, you can store it in the refrigerator for up to 7 days after it's picked up. And so it really is, it's a convenient, accessible food, ready to eat, and you can craft recipes for cultural sense, for culturally appreciated foods, and you can have a variety of packaging sizes. We've done stuff in 4-ounce, 8-ounce, and 16-ounce containers. And then the clients can reuse the containers. So let's talk a little bit about if you're going to do any sort of food processing, who's going to be your regulatory authority? Now, if you are doing anything that is ready to eat, grab and go, you can either do it with health district oversight through a food establishment permit, whether that's a commercial kitchen or whether you have a restaurant that you partner with, or some sort of community food program. They have the ability to do those kinds of processes. If you want to go to a WSDA processing license, you can also do that in a community kitchen. Typically, WSDA is for wholesale foods, and health district inspection, a county health district inspection, will be for retail foods. They're going to be regulating under the retail food code. So those are the two official regulation points that you're going to be looking at. If you're a food bank and you have a dry kitchen, you probably are under health district inspection. And so you already have a relationship with a health district and they can answer any questions that you might have. The one thing I would say is that we've done it under both. We've worked with WSDA food processors. We've also worked with restaurants, and right now we're working with the local Community Action Center in Bremerton, and they do Meals on Wheels and Head Start. They have a Head Start program, so they do the Head Start meals, as well as the food processing that we're doing for our farm to freezer product. So they have a pretty good sized commercial kitchen. If you're doing soups, under WSDA, you have to submit recipes for everything that you do. Under health district inspection, you only have to be able to be verifiable in your process. So you can do any kind of soup you want as long as you can get it cooled to the appropriate temperature within the appropriate time. You're able to store it in, whether it's under refrigeration or whether you're packaging it for freezing. And that is all the health district is concerned about, is that you have appropriate holding temperatures and that's all that they're worried about. Under WSDA, you're going to have to submit recipes for everything you do. So if you want to do a squash soup, you can do a squash soup, but you submit the recipe to them. They approve it through the food processing program. And if you want to make changes and you would say, hey, we've got a bunch of apples, we'd like to do squash apple soup, technically that's a different recipe, so you're going to have to submit a new recipe. At the restaurant, on the restaurant or health district side, you can do whatever you want in that regard. Both require food labels, and it's really important to have food labels. I don't know if you remember the picture, we had some logos that typically a food label needs to include who did the processing, the physical address of who did the processing. It should include a list of ingredients, and ideally it includes the list of expanded ingredients, which if you're putting a label on a relatively small container can kind of be a pain, especially if you are doing a soup and you decide to use one of the prepared vegetable stock concentrates, because the food ingredient list on those is like big, but it's got things like soy and gluten in it, so you need to be careful about that. If you're just doing something like applesauce, you've got apples and water. That is it. So the fewer ingredients, the more minimally processed your food is, and the fewer ingredients that you're using, the better, the easier it is to do food labels. You do have to label for allergens. Unless you are processing in an allergy-free environment, you need to say something to the effect that this food was processed in a facility where nuts, seafood, dairy, gluten, or wheat, soy, and sesame is the new one. So there is a list of food allergens that you are required to label on. But like if you make a cream soup, say you make a corn soup and you throw a little splash of cream in there, you do need to label that specifically as well. If you have a kitchen where you're processing maybe in a gluten-free environment, then you can label things as gluten-free. But if there is any like traditional bread making or any gluten being used in the kitchen, you cannot label it. You have to be really careful where allergens are concerned. And then you have to label the volume. WSDA requires you to label the physical weight in grams as well as the fluid volume. Health district only requires fluid volume. So, but we label both. And then obviously like what the item is. It's roasted squash soup. And we have worked with both farmers as well as some folks in the cottage food around, what does labeling look like? Um, and, obviously you want to have some branding on it. We use Uline labels. We buy labels through Uline and with a 2-inch by 4-inch because they fit on a variety of different containers. It's great being able to use round labels. You might be able to get more content on the top of the lid. But whatever label system works for you. As far as certifications, everybody's going to need a food handler's card. Anybody that's doing the food processing. If you are processing at a kitchen, there's going to be a certified food production manager at that kitchen if you're processing under health district inspection, because that is part of the retail food code. We had a big flurry over the last few years with the change in the food code that happened in 2022, and most food banks have either through a coalition or individually have a food manager. And that certification is something that is required if you're doing any sort of packaging or processing of foods. If you want to up your ante and go to more industrial scale, there is what they call preventive controls for food processing. It's basically a 3-day HACCP course that gets you through everything you would ever want to know about traceability, critical control points, possible contamination, and it's basically the FDA requirement. If you're going to be a food processor where you're going to be distributing beyond Good Samaritan. And then if you want to do shelf stable under low acid foods or Tetra Pak or anything like that, WSU offers what they call the Better Process Control School. It has a 3-day low acid acidified food component that covers jams, jellies, anything that you're going to be like pickles, relishes. And then it has 2 days on low acid food that covers basically industrial pressure canning. And so they offer it usually in February. It's at a hotel in SeaTac. I've got resources on how to access that. And then as far as storage and distribution, if you are a food bank, you're already covered by Good Samaritan, and you've got health district inspection, you're keeping track of the temperatures on your freezers and refrigerators. If you are under WSDA inspection, you're going to require a WSDA warehouse permit. And essentially the warehouse permit says, here's where my freezer is, here's where my refrigeration is, here's where I store my dry goods. And that's part of your certification and inspection process. Whenever you have anything that requires time temperature control for food safety, you're going to have you're going to have a regulatory authority. And so anything that involves freezing, so dairy, meat, any sort of processed foods that require freezing or refrigeration. The only thing that does not require time and temperature control for food safety is minimally processed greens, field greens. So produce that you're getting in, it is all required to be washed before it's eaten. So it is not already technically under the food safety rules, it is not considered a ready to eat food. And so for produce, you're going to refrigerate it for quality, but not for food safety, which is kind of a nuance. But for farmers, it's kind of a workaround because it means that they don't have to have the health district inspecting their pack shed. So are there any questions about regulations? Because it's like the worst part, because people are like, yeah, we want to do this, and they don't know where to start. And any questions at this point? Are we going ahead? Okay.
Yeah, hands up. Go for it. And how much time do we have?
30-ish minutes, but we have until
Okay.
Oh shoot, sorry, it's 11:30 already. We have maybe 15 more minutes total on
Okay. As far as resources, WSU Consumer Food Safety, and there is a handout that goes along with all of this. It has links to all of this. WSU is a great resource. Girish Garjal, who is the head of the Consumer and Food Safety Department at WSU, he's an extension. His appointment is as an extension faculty. That means that he's not tied to the campus. That means he can come out in the community and do trainings. It also means that he can do support services for counties and individuals and organizations. So if you want to develop a process for something, or you need if you're going to do some sort of product that's going to have a QR code that maybe, so say you decide to do a buy one, give one. So you're selling some of a processed food, your applesauce. You make the best applesauce in the world. And so you want to be able to sell some of it to the community to cover the cost of your processing. Garish is the person you're going to want to talk to, because he's going to look at your process, and he is a process authority, and he can do the necessary testing to determine that your process is correct. And if you're using like a USDA approved recipe and process, it's really pro forma. But Garish is an amazing resource. They also offer a whole series of training programs. And so you can't, the link here is not clickable, but if you just on the menu on the left side of the screen there, they have the basics of food safety, wash your hands, all of that sort of thing. But they also have a list of food preservation resources that are from WSU as well as from Oregon State. And then they have their training programs. So they're a great resource. They also, the WSU, because WSU is awesome, they are, through their food systems program, they have what they do a whole bunch of classes. And one of the things that they're doing right now is a food preservation winter lunch and learn. And so they're talking about, it's kind of crafted for like homesteaders, so their first one is in November. It's preservation for thoughtful gifts, but it's an overview of like jams and jellies for, gift giving. And then they're going to do fermenting, and then they're going to talk a little bit about planning. But this one is actually free. It is a great resource if you want to pass it along to clients. It's just like a 1 hour quick webinar, and then it will also be recorded and be available on their website. The WSU Food Systems team has a number of other resources. It's on the resource list. They do the Cultivating Success class. They do what they call growing groceries. There is a fee associated with the growing groceries class. You can take them individually, or you can take them as a whole. But they're a great way if you have people that are interested in growing their own food. And it's like I think it's like a 10-week series, and it goes through everything from soils to seeds to growing to variety selection, the whole 9 yards, IPM. So they've got a lot of resources, and on the resource list that I put together, they have links to all of those kinds of things. But this is something you can pass on to your clients. That's about it. That's all I've got right now. If you want to ask any questions, I'm wide open. I'm going to stop sharing now. There's my contact information. You can give me a call. I mean, we started the Farm to Freezer program because we had a bunch of cauliflower that we were just so excited about. And then we got an unanticipated early season freeze, and it made the tops of all of them kind of like a little yucky, but it could be trimmed off, but we had a lot of it. And so basically what we did is we went to a friend of mine who has a restaurant in town, and I mean, we had like 60 pounds of this cauliflower that was slightly blemished. And I took it to her, and we had some garlic, and I said, "What can we do with this?" And she's like, "Well, how about a roasted cauliflower soup?" And she says, "You got any dairy?" And so I went over to the food bank, and I said, "Do you guys have any half and half or cream?" And they did. And so I took it over and I gave it to the restaurateur, and she put it in containers, and we stuck a label on it. And that's how we started. And then we applied for some grants, and we've kind of grown the program now. We applied for a couple of rounds of resiliency grants. We did some cooking videos. We did a whole bunch of stuff. We had SNAP recipes that corresponded with what was in the containers, and we had little QR codes. We did a whole bunch of that stuff. And then the Washington State Department of Ecology, and this is kind of something if you're interested in getting some funding. Washington State Department of Ecology has what they call the Public Participation Grant Program, and it usually opens in the spring. So it was open January of 2025. So every odd year. So the next time it'll be open is probably December, January, February of 2027.
Yeah.
Trying to get all my numbers straight here. But you can apply. It's 2 years. You have to be a nonprofit, but it's focused on things like food waste reduction and organics. With the new organics law, there's a particular focus on that, but also things like underserved communities, public cleanups, public education campaigns. But we received, I believe it was 120,000 over 2 years to do food processing, and it paid for the containers, it paid for salary time, it paid for AmeriCorps that assisted us with it. And now I think we're going to get picked up by the county's solid waste program to continue funding our program going forward. So that is a great option if you are a nonprofit and are interested in like the application process. It's only open for 30 days. And I'd like to say it's always open in March, but it's not, because sometimes it's open in January and sometimes it's open in April. But go to the Department of Ecology if you're interested at all in that. Go to the Department of Ecology website and just sign up for their alerts, because they're focused on that. And it's a great way. It's a great way to leverage resources to start a program.
Awesome. So much information, Diane. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. And I definitely want to open it up to folks for questions. We have 6, 7-ish minutes left in the call. So, if you want to have you could raise your hand, you can unmute, just start talking. Yeah, thank you so much, Diane, for coming and chatting with us about this. I think it's a really important topic, and especially as we're really kind of at close to the end of the harvest season, and what do we do with all the apples and all of the food that's left, and that's so vital and important. I know that I've heard a lot of folks talk about how difficult it can sometimes be to kind of navigate those regulations and stuff. It's easy enough. Most of us can make a soup, right? Most of us. But at the same time, how do we know if we're able to put it out there, And we've been chatting recently with some folks from the Department of Health and University of Washington as well to try to start working through some of those regulations. There seems to be kind of like one end or the other. There's the Good Samaritan, there's the really small kind of home kitchen stuff. And then on the other hand, there's industrial stuff, but there's nothing really explicit in between. And there doesn't always seem to be explicit instructions for when you're doing something for donation, which is it can be quite confusing. So yeah, I'm kind of curious about your experience with that. And I know that's a big question, but that's a hard one for a lot of people.
I know a lot of food banks won't take home canned items.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if you have a bunch of pickles that you've canned and you just want to share them with the food bank, most food banks won't take them. I know that right now, the Bainbridge Island Food Bank, because there is a community commercial kitchen space on Bainbridge, and there are several folks that are affiliated with the food bank, I shared some resources with them, and they were going to do jams and jellies. And they had the food bank's blessing, because the food bank is aware of that they're going to be doing it in the community kitchen, and they're going to be doing it under health district inspection. So some of that is possible if you have a close relationship. I know Fair Start was going to be doing a bunch. So if you're like in the King County area, you might hit up Fair Start because they have been working in that space a little bit too. One of the things that they started in Jefferson and Clallam is they called them applesauce parties. And basically they just had a whole bunch of people that got together in like the local Grange where they had a kitchen or like a church basement.
Yeah.
Some of them might have a kitchen that is up to commercial standards. Some of them are just, a stove and a sink and a fridge. But they just got a group of people together and they made a bunch of applesauce and they put it, they had a little bit of money and they bought the deli containers, a box of the deli containers, and they just sent everybody home with applesauce. And that was kind of how Jefferson started theirs. Because they had all this green fruit and they still had people in the community that knew how to make applesauce, and so they did a bunch of that as a community activity.
It's really
And
interesting. Sorry.
I mean, I think that that's great.
Yeah. No, agreed. I think it's really interesting that you mentioned Granges because this is a concept I just heard of recently. I didn't know this was a thing. And some of you guys might be familiar with this already, but I guess
Great resources.
it's a really wonderful resource. They're kind of located everywhere basically, and like a lot of them have, if not a commercial kitchen, at least as far as I understand, there's a kind of tier of like home kitchen versus like commercial kitchen, and sort of in between, there's kind of like what you might find at like a church or whatever, which is great for like being able to, put together something that is permissible to then like put out for donation and that kind of thing. But yeah, really great, interesting resource.
Yeah. Any other questions for Diane?
I will say that if you're on the list, the resource list, I include cottage food, which is under health district inspection, much to their absolute dismay because they want really nothing to do with home food preservation. But if you're able to get people together and they're able to take something home from that product, it makes it a lot less. Technically in that context, you're not commercially food processing. And I know that there's a few food banks that actually have, they have like basically a water bath canning setup that they're able to lend. They have I know there's at least one food bank that I'm aware of that does that as a lending. So they have 4 or 5 of those, and their clients can take them home because right now there are so many apples and pears going into the food banks, and there's only so much that people can eat fresh. But if you can make applesauce or apple butter or whatever, there's some pretty innovative things that some of the food banks are doing.
Yeah, I feel like I could talk about this topic all day. For the sake of time, like we're almost at time, so if anybody else has any thoughts or questions, you can absolutely email me. You can email Diane. We're definitely open to answering questions. And if anyone has anything last minute they want to add in, feel free as well.
Thanks, Diane. Awesome as always.
We appreciate you guys so much. You guys have been such an amazing resource. Do we want to hang on with Olivia just for a few minutes to talk about the North Mason thing?
Yep.
And I just dropped my email in the chat just in case anyone does have any questions. In case you want to reach out, feel free.
And mine is here too.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, and I also put a link to the resource list that Dan was talking about. And I will, when I send out this recording in our newsletter, I'll also include all of those resources, including Diane's slides and that list and so on. So, thank you guys all so much for coming and chatting with us today. Really, really appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.